I am bookseller for Lighthouse Books in Edinburgh. My name's Lindsay and my pronouns are she, her. Um, Alex, would you like to introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about the book we're talking about today, Alien Cold Forge?
Sure, sure. Well, I'm Alex White. I write original novels as well as tie-in novels. So I have a trilogy with Orbit books called The Salvagers, which starts with a big ship at the edge of the universe. And I just had a second trilogy go under contract, so the first book of that should come out next year, and I got a Star Trek book out this month. So yeah, and my pronouns are they, them. So
Cool. And yeah, so to kick us off with this one, would you like to just give us a sort of quick breakdown as to what the Cold Forge is about? There's a few different sort of concurrent storylines. There's different points of view. How would you break it down?
the Cold Forge is really about the cruelty of the medical system, and the way that profit chasing destroys lives. I have quite the axe to grind, being a chronically ill person with two disabled family members, and I wanted to write about that. It's about this corporate auditor named Dorian Sudler, who is a lot like Burke if Burke was effective and smart.
Quite a scary thought.
I wanted to write about somebody who was very effective, that you could almost agree with his decision making, because if you look at most of what he suggests is correct. He's just a monster.
Yeah, that's the scary thing, right? Is that it has this logic to it, the kind of cold logic of capitalism, of cutting costs at the expense of humans.
Yeah, well, and I think that that's been sort of really constant. When I left a job a couple of jobs ago, I remember they said, oh, we're trying to make sure that the disabled and diseased people pay their fair share, so we're making sure their insurance rates go up. And I thought that was just the most messed up thing possible. And so the
Oh, Alan? Okay. Sorry, it sounded like you cut out for a second there, but you're back.
Sorry. So the protagonist is Blue Marsalis, who is a terminally ill black queer woman who is she's trying to cure herself using the alien DNA. And one of the things that Alien has really established is that the alien DNA is capable of rewriting DNA very quickly, like CRISPR, but nobody ever uses it for medical reasons in any of the books. They're always like, oh, let's use it to weaponize. And so I thought I would start with that weaponization storyline as sort of like a way to throw you off. I like to start very much in places that you are familiar with and know, and then try and move you out of your comfort zone as quickly as possible.
I think that was what I found really interesting about your approach, because on the face of it, like an isolated research station that's doing experiments on xenomorphs to turn them into bioweapons is pretty standard alien fare. But
Right.
there's a lot more going on.
Yeah,
Which
I thought it was really funny because the publisher, when they wrote the back blurb for it, it reads like that, right? It's like in an isolated station where they're weaponizing the xenomorph. And people, when they read that advance of the book, they were just like, oh my God, it's the same old crap. They're going to just do another thing, And it's like, it's not, I couldn't say like, it's not going to be like that. But at the same time, explaining exactly how it's not going to be like that's kind of difficult.
Well, so that's one thing I wanted to ask you about was like when you were writing this novel and when you were in contact with the people who are in charge of controlling the output of this franchise, which by this time has ballooned to an enormous kind of sprawling monster. I was,
Wow.
I, yeah, right. I mean, I was kind of just dipping my toe back into it when I discovered your book because I was like going through some of the older comics and things, and that's I really wanted to shine a light on this because I thought that like you're doing some really interesting like queer science fiction in this world, but like it's I think I wanted to like shout it out because um it's part of such a huge thing by this point that I figured it could easily get lost in
Mm.
like, oh yeah, it's about aliens on a research station. But I was curious, was it something that you felt like, in terms of the queer perspective, like um the Blue Marsalis is, I suppose you might say that she's genderqueer. Um, pres- she's interfacing with her colleagues and with the world through um, an android
Hmm.
that she's
That's right.
minded
She
to.
sort of telepresently occupies an android body.
And so, I mean, in terms of like her perspective and her queerness, and was that something that you felt you had to kind of sneak in, as it were, or was it something that the people in charge were kind of open to that perspective, that take on it?
The people in charge were not at all concerned about that. I got no notes back on that book.
Yeah,
They were like, "This is great."
that's cool.
um, yeah, I really thought that I was doing something somewhat subversive and unique, but Alien, and particularly the leading women of Alien, have a tendency to be fairly queer. If not in
Yeah,
affect and dress, then in outright truth. And
yeah,
so I thought if you were going to occupy an android body that wasn't your own, first of all, it's incredibly unlikely that that android body would be anything like you. You know,
yeah.
and second of all, aside from Joss Whedon and a couple of novels, maybe there's not a female android in
Mm,
Alien. And one of the reasons I think that is because they wanted to make you sort of question all the gender roles, and so it's like you have this android role, which is oftentimes sort of put into a subservient position, and so they were like, let's have a gentle man there. And so I thought that that was an interesting way to handle it. And so I wanted to sort of appeal to that as well. And so automatically Marcus became a male android because I wanted that caring male presence. I love Bishop. I think he's great. Lance Henriksen's amazing, and his portrayal is just you want that character on your crew.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and
There,
and and
there's
so
something about his affect which is quite kind of childlike. It's very innocent.
mhm. Right,
Um,
exactly, and he seems very sweet. And I appreciate that, and so I wanted to have that, and so I had a male android, but then you have sort of this female protagonist, and the situations that came up from that sort of evolved naturally over the course of writing it. I if the only way you interact with your colleagues is through a telepresence body, and that body is of a different gender than yours, that doesn't mean that you're not going to form attachments and romances and all that other stuff, and your coworkers will come to think of you as that body.
right.
Um,
Yeah, because that was something that was quite striking about the characterization there is that the points at which people do encounter Blue in her own body, the way that they react to her, the way that they treat her is immediately extremely different.
Yeah, it's usually fairly poor. Because the one that I always think of is Anne Waxler, who is Blue's ex-girlfriend. And for those sort of at home who haven't read yet, Blue, before the book started, had a girlfriend inside of her male body. And the girlfriend is straight. Anne is both straight and fairly ableist. She dated the android body because she likes synthetics. She's sort of a fetishist for that. And dealing with Blue's terminal illness was too much for her. So it was sort of both the queerness and the terminal illness made her decide that she was going to leave that character.
I mean, the kind of fetishization aspect makes perfect sense. You can't tell me that there are these sort of Adonis-like androids going around in the world that are incredibly sweet, caring individuals, and that there are not going to be people just lusting after them constantly.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, so you're kind of a lot of these aspects of the novel, and I guess of like they're implicit within the universe. There are these elements are all present because I think from the beginning there's always been quite the idea of like cyberpunk kind of questions of identity and ownership of one's actions have been in question. And what was it about like the object or the people, the characters of the androids that attracted you as characters to write about?
Well, I mean, for androids, the concept of consent is so dubious. And so they're oftentimes not really allowed to dictate their place in the story. This actually came up because as I wrote, when I first started writing Cold Forge, I did not quite put together how non-consensual the relationship between Blue and Marcus was. It wasn't until I started actually writing it that I was like, wow, this is kind of messed up.
Right. So yeah, for people who haven't read the book, the android that Blue is using to communicate with her colleagues and interact with the world is when she is not plugged in, is going around the world doing his own thing. Yeah. So I mean, one of the there's a lot of rules that are established about the way in which androids can conduct themselves, and I thought it was a very interesting way to play with that in quite sort of unsettling ways when you have somebody, like having telepresence through their body who's not constricted by those rules.
Right, yeah. She has no behavioral inhibitors when she's in charge. And that becomes an important point at one point. I think that the androids are, Alien at its heart is a story for the worker. It's for people who are trapped in a capitalist hellscape. And, I love it for that, and the androids are so interesting because whenever somebody's like, oh, I'm trapped in a capitalist hellscape or whatever, you never go, well, are you on the bottom of it, though? And it's like, they are. They way are.
They truly are. Yeah, I know, it reminds me of like the way that nobody talks about how the Star Wars droids are just straight up slaves. It's really weird.
They talked about it in Solo and then dropped it. Just like brought it up and then dropped it. Oh, we're not going to answer that.
Yeah, totally. I know. So yeah, that's the thing. It's like a lot of the time you have these elements in science fiction stories that are just kind of taken for granted as like, oh, there's a robot there because it's the future. But like, yeah, like actually thinking about what it means to be part of this hierarchical system. Because I was going to
Yeah,
ask
and
you, like,
I hesitate. I of course hesitate to call them slaves because there's nothing like slavery except slavery. But
yeah,
it is interesting because when you look at, sort of the three laws of robotics, for example, we enshrined those as like science fiction canon. Okay, like the three laws of robotics, that's just the ultimate good for robots, right? Like that's what you're supposed to do.
hmm
But when you look at it, it's like those three laws, if you bound them to any other sentient creature, would be monstrous.
yeah,
That's slavery. Like, and so it's like you have to sacrifice your life for me. That's rule number one. Rule number two is that you have to obey every single order. And rule number three is that you have to preserve yourself, except where it conflicts with the first two. And it's really telling to me that the sci-fi writers of the golden age were like, what is the perfect future? Oh, that's right. It's one where I have slaves again.
and
And
yeah. Was it Asimov who came up with the laws?
it was. And Asimov is so, like, his effect on science fiction is not great in a lot of ways. Sometimes it's really great, but other times it's really not. And certainly the laws of robotics and the way that we work so hard to create the illusion of commandable sentience, right? Like, I need Siri to sound like it's taking an order from me. Like, that's so strange. It's not like we're trying to live in harmony with our natural environment or our technological environment even. It's like we have to simulate a master-servant relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that, so, I mean, do you think that that is one of the things that has endured about this series and this this world, because it is, it's had so many spin-offs and new movies and series are now being made, and there was a quote going around from, I believe it's the showrunner who worked on Fargo, who's doing the new series, where he talked about like how this is, so his idea for this world is like, well, what if none of the inequalities going on just now were solved? And, like, people immediately lost their minds because they're like, wait a minute, I don't want politics in my science fiction. Aliens has always been apolitical.
Oh, that's such bullshit.
Very funny.
I don't know what your live feed is like, but that's crap. That is crap. Like, if you don't have politics in your story, then you're an ardent supporter of the status quo.
Exactly.
And
I mean, so because it's wild because from the beginning you've got this very obvious like blue collar worker analogs that they're literally space truckers. That's what makes them so relatable. From the first movie onwards.
One thing I love about that is actually you can see that there's a divide in the shots between like Ripley and Dallas and the rest of the crew, because Ripley and Dallas are the college degree havers.
Yeah, that's true.
Lambert as well, maybe. But they always stage them on opposite sides of the shot. Ripley always stands near Dallas, even though they never agree.
Yeah, you're not gonna find them down fixing the engines.
No. It's funny. In the second book, I had an intermodal ship officer consult on the like landing sequences and stuff like that, because it was like I felt like it would be more akin to driving like the Evergreen Ever Given, that big boat that got stuck in the Suez Canal, as opposed to like landing a space shuttle. These are massive ships and they just haul stuff. And it's true. Yeah, Alien believes that things got more advanced, not better. And as a person who lives in the future, I think so.
Yeah, I unfortunately And I mean, I think that almost as like an embodiment of this, you've got the character of Dorian that you brought up a bit earlier, which I don't know. This guy is such a brilliant villain because he's like he reminds me of like Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, but like I mean, he is an absolute embodiment of everything that the company is. He's a manifestation of that.
Right, he's a very good employee.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what's so scary. It's like, yeah, like you say, everything that he says like makes this kind of sense because we're so used to hearing that kind of messaging of like, cost cutting and austerity and
Right.
efficiency. Um, yeah, I mean, was so like, but he is, not just that as well. There's you have long sequences where it's from his point of view, and he he's a painter as well. It's kind of creepy. There's something about the fact that he has this inner life. I was curious about what your thoughts were while you were drawing this character.
Why is he a painter?
Yeah.
Because Hitler was a painter.
Oh God. Okay. Nice.
Right. It's to say, like, I'm an artist myself, and it's to say that everybody has this thing that they can hide behind as some sort of humanizing force, and he totally uses it to manipulate Anne later. He's like, oh, I'm a sensitive artist. Secretly, no one understands me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, shut up.
I think we've all known the very manipulative person who says that kind of thing.
Right, and because he's a painter, it lends him this extra air. But like I said, you can find tyrants and mass murderers posing with their kids and smiling and stuff. Yeah, he is very much a creature of I guess capitalist id. He's hyper individualistic. He's all about sort of the bottom line. He doesn't understand the use of certain people, like entirely as a human being.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
quite a disturbing thing to hear when you kind of see his rationalizations for that from his point of view. It's just like genuinely doesn't understand why or how these people can function because they're not contributing anything
Right.
efficiently to
Yeah,
the function.
and he's quick to cut him off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As well as the airlock.
Right. He's like, right, and that was something else is, so when I got that job, I started, I was working at a place where we had a lot of acquisitions. And so I was regularly going out to Silicon Valley and being like, hey, I'm from the parent company. This is how you have to do things now. And I met these people who they would play games with your job because they wanted like clout.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make you look like an idiot because I want to get a raise potentially or something like that. And they don't think like, I'm screwing with your ability to make money. I'm screwing with your family's ability to eat. Like they don't think that stuff. If you're disabled, it's like, you're screwing with my ability to live. Like,
Yeah.
But
Well,
people will regularly have these little political spats at the office.
Well, yeah, I mean, you talk about your ability to live, and I feel it's quite scary. It's quite, you embody that in Blue's experience where you have these kind of very, quite scary exchanges where Blue, because of her illness, it's quite resource intensive to keep her alive. And
Yeah.
how much is it actually worth to the company to, and I thought that was a good metaphor for like living in, a capitalist society that doesn't really measure your worth in terms of your existence more as what you can produce. And
Let me tell you something. America hates disabled people. And It's evident in the fact that they can't have more than $2,000 in their bank account without being penalized out of their benefits. It's
Yeah.
evident in the fact that when they're like, oh, we don't discriminate in our hiring against disabled people, it's like, okay, but your insurance costs go up when you have lots of medical bills.
Right.
And your HR people notice that. And if you're the person in a wheelchair with a ventilator, you know, and it's like, and on top of that, even if you can go to work, even if you're able enough to go to work, that means that you're going to have to get understanding from your boss, who may be like Dorian.
It may be like, yeah, exactly. And I mean,
I'm going to have to ask for more days off. I'm going to have to ask for 3 times as many days off as everybody else. Is that okay?
Yeah.
The answer should, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, it's different but similar here in the UK, where there's just this constant pressure of like, are you fit to work? You know, that's the kind of the catchphrase when anybody is looking for any kind of support. It's just being kind of offloaded to themselves or to, you know, their family members to look after them, and it's not about their quality of life. It's about how much they can produce.
And a lot of my books feature disabled protagonists for that reason. You know, Every Mountain Made Low also features an autistic protagonist, and it's because she's in a hyper-capitalist dystopian society. And I thought, you know who would be terrible at that? A person with a lot of autism problems. You know,
Yeah.
and it's true. I mean, our society is hostile towards mental health. It's hostile towards anything that's not straight white males. You know,
Yeah.
and you know, the Cold Forge is all about that, and it's all about the way that people sort of shove you to the side. The thought for it came up because I was at this hotel and I was preparing for a conference, and one of the conference presenters had a telepresence robot, like one of those iPads on a Segway kind of robots.
Oh yeah.
You know, and it drove around and it talked to all of us. And I thought, you know, if you needed to be rescued, because I was trying to come up with my alien pitch at the time, and I was like, if you needed to be rescued, and that was your only way of accomplishing your tasks, the other survivors would not take you seriously. They would be like, you don't have a dog in the fight, even though you do, even though if you lose, you will die. They would be like, nobody cares about you.
Yeah.
And even towards the end of the book, when things are going really badly, and they're like, okay, we're going to work our way towards the escape pods, do you think any of them are like, oh, let's get across to the crew habitat and save the terminally ill person?
Right. Yeah, of course. That's like low priority.
Right, and if the answer is that's a low priority, does that mean that her life is worth less because there's less of it? You know?
Yeah.
And, you know, to the people who are in that situation, that's their day. Like, people do that to them all the time. And people do this at work all the time. And so, again, Alien is so much about aggressions in the workplace. You know, the reason I brought up the Silicon Valley stuff is I met a bunch of Dorians.
That's yeah, you told me that before, and it's like genuinely the scariest thing I've heard. It's like
they don't seem like Dorian when you meet them. They're all, you know, late 20s, really fit, degree from Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, somewhere like that, you know, triathloner, yeah, and just will absolutely destroy you because they don't care about anything except themselves.
yeah.
You know, and it's like, is it time to start top grading and cutting people out of the company? Awesome. You know, am I going to screw you over because I want control of this project? Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And it's like, what happens if we needed to live? Like, what if it's like you or me? What's that going to be? You know?
I know, and yeah. So I like that about your story because, you know, in the movie Aliens, which, you know, it's one of my favorite movies, that you've got the character of Burke who embodies also this idea of the company, but he is this kind of bumbling like dweeb who doesn't really accomplish anything that he tries to do. It just
Right.
kind of screws everything up, and it's easy to think that, oh yeah, it's cool. You know, it's easy to buy into this trope that like the snake will always be uncovered. You know, the sleazy company guy, and you know the goodies will win. But it doesn't really work that way in real life.
Not at all. Not at all. And I like to, I like to get people sort of close to that edge. I need you to worry. One of the things that I find sort of quintessentially difficult about Alien is that people feel like they know who's going to survive at the start of the story. You know, it's like, oh, well, let's just look for the powerful woman. Yeah,
Yeah.
this powerful woman, short hair, she'll be fine.
Yes. Yes.
If she seemed like a screamer, then no, she'll be dead. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Um,
And I'm like, I want you to believe that it could go either way,
yeah.
the whole thing. And I need you to, and into Charybdis, it's much twistier. The other Alien book that I wrote, good luck.
Well, yeah, right. I had no idea. Yeah, I just finished Into Charybdis, the sequel to the Cold
Ah,
Forge, a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, I thought, yeah, I could talk about your books for hours, Alex, because I love them. But like, I just want to shout out the fact that you also, in that book, you do something very clever, which is that you point out the fact that the U.S. colonial Marines are not the good guys. They are there to, you know, it's right there in the name, but it's never really thought about it expressly. Is the fact that they are there to protect colonial interests. They're not there
that's
to
right.
help people.
They're not colonists, they're colonizers.
Exactly. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and the other thing, and in light of that, you might notice that I set up Cheyenne Hunt very much in the white savior role. I gave her all the stereotypes.
Yeah.
I gave her some romantic tension. She has the moment with Tehran in the hall where she wraps her jacket
Oh my
over
God. Yeah.
Tehran.
Yes.
You know, all these things where you're like, oh, that's the hero.
Yeah. Yeah. You got me with that as well. No, it's good. Um, yeah, I love this. You're playing with these. You're playing with established tropes that are present within the universe specifically, and also just wider fiction in kind of interesting
Yeah.
ways. Um,
Well, you know, one of the things that's really important to me about that book, and the reason that I wrote it, is because I believe that, you know, I'm tired of this sort of jingoistic, like, we need to go to war. We love to go to war in this country. We're all about war for some
mhm.
reason. And the problem is we always fail to realize that the people who suffer are not our soldiers. It's the civilians. I mean,
Yeah,
our soldiers suffer. We should be very careful with them. But civilians suffer in war. And they suffer for the games of billionaires. They suffer for the egos of billionaires. They, you know, it's horrible. I'm kind of, I don't even want to do it.
yeah. No, that's quite right. Yeah, I grew up, you know, kind of very addicted to military science fiction, and you know, it's easy to sort of buy into the kind of hoorah attitude without really questioning like what goes behind it.
It's
And
very, right. Some of them are like parodies to start with. Like 40K is a parody of sort of, you know, Thatcher's values. And, you
mhm,
know, and then like sometimes you'll meet people who take the parody seriously, like an actual
yeah,
fascist who loves Warhammer. And you're like,
yeah,
it's making fun of you.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, yeah.
Or like Judge Dredd, like police fascists who love Judge Dredd. And you're like, you understand that you're the subject of the joke.
I know. At some point it's like has there ever been a successful anti-war movie, right? It's like it's a hard thing to actually do because, you know, Starship Troopers is a great example of that. It's like it's critiquing and parodying, lampooning fascism, but at the same time it's a really badass war movie about people shooting giant bugs. So I don't know if it actually works in that respect.
You know, it's so funny because when you read into Charybdis from, you know, because it takes place, of course, from 4 different perspectives or 5 different perspectives. and whenever it's like written from the civilian perspective, of course, it's very horrific and dark and all this other stuff. And whenever it's written from the Colonial Marines perspective, it's very like, yeah, we're the heroes. This is the greatest.
Yeah. Yeah. They're just having a good time. They're living their best life.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Well, we've been running long here for Instagram Live. And I could talk about this for hours, but we should probably wrap up. But I want to thank you again for joining us today. And was there any kind of current like projects or online presences that you wanted to shout out?
Well, you can find me here on Instagram as the Alex White. You can find me on Twitter as Alex White Books. You can find me online at alexrwhite.com. I couldn't get Alex White. It's a really common name. So, in any of my online presences. And I have a book, Star Trek Deep Space Nine Revenant, comes out the 21st of this month. It is about Jadzia Dax and Kira. If you like Jadzia Dax and Kira, which I do. I couldn't believe when they were like, "We want you to write for the Trill," and I was like, "Why?" They're like, "We wanted to."
Come on.
Well, it's kind of right. It's like we wanted this non-binary. Like, apparently, I'm the first out non-binary Trek writer.
Really?
Which I'm surprised. Well, there's 900 novels, so somebody else was non-binary.
Wow.
They just know it or have the language for it at the time, or
Yeah, totally.
There's no chance that's all straight people writing those 900 books.
I know. It reminds me of like when the U.S. Air Force were like, "Oh, look, it's the first all gay like flight crew, like for the first time ever." Honestly, first time. Never happened before.
We had what was it? A group of like a pilot group of women that were all pretty gay. It was, unofficially.
No, I need to get in on that. So we've been talking today about Alien: The Cold Forge, Alex White's awesome book, which also has a sequel called Alien Into Charybdis. And sick. That's Revenant. Nice.
Yeah, I got Revenant. It's not out yet.
Awesome.
It's my copy, and then Into Charybdis. Here we go. Here it is.
Oh, nice. I love this cover as well. It's so cool.
I was so happy with it. I was really wondering how that was going to come out. The Cold Forge's cover was, I don't want to complain, but it's pretty basic. And so when I saw that, I was, whoa!
Yeah.
Somebody gonna update.
I love it. Yes. So you can find Alex White's books on at lighthousebookshop.com. And yes, thanks again for joining us. I've been Lindsay, talking from Lighthouse Books in Edinburgh, and thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, Lindsay.